1. How to master your emotions and stay unshakable. Napoleon Hill's timeless wisdom. You don't need to control the world to be at peace. There is a silent force that awakens in those who learn to observe before reacting. A force that does not impose itself, does not shout, does not dispute territory, but that profoundly transforms everything it touches. This force is called emotional self-awareness, and it is in this that true power lies. Not that artificial power that depends on applause, status, or domination over others, but the authentic power that comes from mastering oneself. The world around you may be in ruins. People may lie, disappear, hurt you, but if you remain whole inside, nothing really shakes you. That's what we're talking about today, about how to master your emotions and remain unshakable, not out of pride, but out of freedom. Have you ever noticed how emotions take over the body before the mind even understands what's happening? Sometimes everything seems calm on the outside, but inside there is a storm. Your chest is tight, your stomach is churning, your breath is held, your mind races, creates stories, imagines outcomes, judges, accuses, fears. And when you realize it, you have already reacted. You have screamed, you have frowned, you have pushed someone away, you have sabotaged yourself again. Because deep down, you have not learned to observe before acting. Because deep down, you have not yet learned to be with what you feel, without running away, without repressing, without blaming yourself. Napoleon Hill said, "You have power over your mind, not over events. Realize this and you will find strength." And this is what few people understand, that controlling your emotions does not mean becoming indifferent, nor numbing yourself. It is exactly the opposite. It means feeling everything deeply, but without allowing it to destroy you. It means looking anger in the eye and not giving in to the scream. It means feeling fear coming and still moving forward firmly. It means recognizing sadness and choosing not to give up. The biggest lie you've been told is that controlling emotions is something only cold people do, when in fact, it's one of the most spiritual acts there is. It's pure alchemy. It's taking pain and transforming it into lucidity. It's taking anger and transforming it into movement. It's taking fear and transforming it into strategy. This requires courage. It requires training. It requires awareness. And above all, it requires presence. You don't need to control everything, not everyone. Not what people think about you. You just need to learn not to lose yourself inside yourself when the world pushes you out. Because when you learn to hold what you feel without exploding, without running away, without hurting yourself, then you find your center, a silent place, stable, unmoving, even in the midst of a storm. And when you find this place, something changes. You start to act differently. You start to speak with more intention. You start to choose silence as your response. You start to no longer be affected by what used to bring you down. People notice, but they can't explain it. They feel it, but they don't understand, because your power now doesn't scream. It just exists. It just is. This is the wisdom that transcends time, the one that Napoleon Hill wrote so much about, the one that wise people cultivate in silence, and that now perhaps is ready to be born in you too, because this is where your true strength begins, not when the world obeys you, but when you decide to no longer obey your unconscious emotions. Emotional mastery is the birth of your inner freedom, and everything changes when you awaken to it. 2. The hidden cost of reacting to everything. Not every emotion deserves a response. You don't control yourself while you react to everything that touches you. When every harsh word, every sideways look, every external discomfort has the power to take away your peace, you are still in the hands of the world. You are still a prisoner of what happens outside, and maybe you don't even realize it. Maybe you call it a strong personality, sincerity, authenticity, but in reality it is slavery, emotional slavery. The real danger is not in what they do to you, it is in what you do with what they do. Because while everything outside has power over your reaction, your mind is not yours. It belongs to the environment, to the opinions, to the moods of others. Reacting has become a habit, an automatic mechanism, an escape that dresses up as courage. But real courage is stopping, breathing, and choosing. The mind is not a still stone. It is a living field, a terrain where tiny stimuli sow storms, a drier tone of voice, a lack of response, a longer silence. None of this is a big deal, but all of this is active. It awakens ghosts that you didn't even know were still living inside you. And before you know it, you've already said too much. You've already shouted. You've already slammed the door. You've already regretted it. You have no idea how much your environment shapes your reactions. Small gestures create big responses. A hot coffee in your hands, and you feel more welcomed. A cold coffee, and everything seems distant. The body responds before consciousness, and if the body has already responded, you've already lost the moment to choose. That's why self-control doesn't start with big decisions. It starts with small pauses. 3 seconds. Breathe. That's all. 3 seconds of consciousness before any response. 3 seconds to remember that you are not what you feel. You are what you decide to do with what you feel. This is the line that separates emotional slavery from inner freedom. Most people live in constant reaction, and they don't realize it, but the price is high. The mind becomes exhausted. The body becomes ill. The heart becomes hypersensitive, not because of too much love, but because of a lack of center. When you overreact, it's because you've lost your center. And those who lose their center become dependent on the outside to regain their balance. But this can change, not with forced effort, but with presence, with awareness, with intention. When you notice anger rising, don't repress it. Observe it, feel it, embrace it, but don't act yet. Wait. Give the emotion what it didn't have before, space to be seen, and then decide, not as an impulse but as a choice. Because in the end, true strength isn't in never feeling. It's in feeling and still remaining whole. It's in burning inside and still not burning everything around you. That's power. That's freedom. That's being unshakable inside, even when the world tries to knock you off your axis from the outside. 3. The mind as a silent battlefield. What you don't understand, your body feels. Not every scream is heard. Not every pain is clear. Sometimes the mind screams in a way that only the body understands. It's in the tense jaw, in the tight chest, in the breath that shortens for no reason. It's there, in the small, silent signs, that the inner war reveals itself. Because before it explodes outwardly, anger burns inside. Before pushing someone away, sadness has already settled in like a shadow. You can even ignore what you feel, but the body never forgets. It carries every unprocessed emotion as if it were its own. And in fact, it is. Because what is not understood becomes tension. What is not welcomed becomes a symptom. And what is not heard screams for attention in the most sensitive place it can find. A mind in conflict is like a minefield. Any false step can trigger old pains, and they emerge disguised as anger, anxiety, irritation. But deep down, they are memories, unresolved memories, scenes frozen in time that still want an answer, but you don't recognize them because you're too busy fighting the present without realizing that the pain is not from now. And here's the secret. Everything that hurts you today teaches you about what was not healed yesterday. That look that bothers you, those words that dismantle you, all of these are echoes, reflections of poorly healed wounds. You react, but you don't understand why. And this lack of understanding keeps you stuck, spinning in circles, repeating patterns. But there is a way, not of rigid control, but of listening, of presence, of real awareness. Instead of running away from what you feel, you can ask yourself, where does it hurt? Not in the physical body, but in the emotional. What don't I want to feel right now? This simple question, asked in silence, has the power to open doors that have been locked for years. Because the mind doesn't need judgment, it needs space to show what is asking for healing. Imagine the mind as a fire, a serene fire. a conscious fire. Everything that is thrown into this fire, fear, anger, sadness, can be transformed, not denied, not extinguished, but transmuted. As Marcus Aurelius said, fire transforms everything that is thrown into it. This is the power of presence, the power to observe without getting lost, to feel without sinking, because those who observe dominate. Those who feel consciously do not become hostage to their feelings, and those who listen to their own silence find within themselves the point where nothing can shake them, the point of steadfastness in the midst of chaos, the point where even pain bows before clarity. Emotional silence is not repression, it is freedom. What you repress commands you in silence. There is a huge difference between keeping quiet out of wisdom and keeping quiet out of fear, between keeping quiet to listen to yourself and keeping quiet to avoid feeling. Most people confuse these two attitudes and end up exiling themselves from their own truth. This is not called self-control, it is repression. And all repression is a disguised type of prison. When you deny what you feel, the emotion does not disappear. It just hides. It hides in automatic attitudes, in disproportionate reactions, in words spoken without thinking. What was not felt with presence will be experienced without awareness. That is why so many repeat patterns without realizing it. That is why so many sabotage relationships, dreams, moments of peace, without understanding why. The truth is that emotional silence is only freedom when it is born of understanding, not of fear. When you choose to embrace your pain in silence, not to bury it, but to get to know it, because you can only free yourself from what you have the courage to touch. And touching pain requires courage. Courage to be with yourself without judging yourself. Courage to allow even the darkest emotion to be seen without guilt. But what most people forget is that spirituality is not emotional anesthesia. It is not smiling when everything inside you is imploding. It is not repeating mantras trying to silence a heart that only wants to be heard. True spirituality does not run away from pain. It transcends it. It does not disguise fear. It transforms it. It is not a leap out of reality, but a deep dive into it. With wide awake eyes. Emotional freedom does not arise when you avoid what you feel, but when you learn to feel without losing yourself, when you name what hurts, when you allow sadness to breathe, anger to express itself with maturity, fear to be welcomed as a messenger, not as an enemy. And to do this, sometimes you have to write what you don't have the courage to say. Take a blank sheet of paper and let your soul speak, without censorship, without polishing, without trying to appear stronger than you really are, because only when the truth flows from the pen does the soul begin to breathe. And in this raw, intimate and silent space, something rare is born. Clarity. And clarity liberates. It is not the absence of emotions that makes you strong. It is the intimacy with them. Because those who know their own abysses do not fear the chaos of the world. Those who allow pain to pass no longer carry the weight of hiding it. And those who allow themselves to feel discover that behind the storm, there is a calm that cannot be broken, a freedom that does not depend on pretending to be well, a strength that is only born when you are whole. 5. Attachment as the invisible prison of the soul. What you refuse to lose already possesses you. Most people believe that suffering arises from what happens to them, but it's not the fact itself that hurts. It's the attachment. It's the blind desire for everything to be the way you want it, when you want it, the way you think it should be. This inner rigidity, this silent cry for control, is what chains the soul and feeds fear. Attachment doesn't scream. It whispers. It disguises itself as love, as care, as responsibility, but deep down, it's dependence. It's the refusal to accept the impermanence of life. It's the childish attempt to freeze the flow of the world, but life doesn't stop. And everything you try to hold on too tightly starts to slip through your fingers. When your mood swings according to someone else's behavior, you're no longer yourself. You're exiled. You're in their hands. When your peace depends on a result, a response, an acknowledgement, you have already given up your freedom. And this surrender is not love, it is not faith, it is imprisonment, but the soul only finds rest when it understands that nothing external is guaranteed, nothing is yours by right. Nothing is fixed, and this is not a reason to despair. It is a source of wisdom, because when you accept that everything can change, including yourself, a serenity is born that cannot be stolen, because it is not anchored outside but inside. In Stoic philosophy, there was a daily exercise of remembering impermanence. They called it premeditatio malorum, imagining with serenity everything that could be lost, not as punishment, but as preparation, as if saying to the mind, even if everything disappears, I remain, because I am not what I possess. I am what remains when everything else is gone. This practice does not harden, it softens. It teaches you to live with more presence, with more gratitude, with more lightness. Because when you stop holding on, you start to appreciate. And when you start to appreciate, fear diminishes, because what is lived with awareness, even if it is gone, leaves a trace of eternity. Freedom is not in avoiding loss. It is in learning to let go without letting go. It is in loving without possessing, in caring without controlling, in being whole, even when something breaks. And when this state arises within you, a new kind of power awakens, a silent, unbreakable, non-negotiable power, because it does not come from the world. It comes from the peace of knowing that no matter what happens, you do not have to lose yourself. 6. When you stop seeking approval, something awakens. Silence is the sound of someone coming home. For a long time, you believed that you needed to be accepted. You needed to fit in, please, convince. You shaped words, gestures, choices, everything to fit into spaces that were never made for your soul. And the more you tried to be enough for others, the more distant you became from yourself. The search for approval is a maze with no way out. It promises you belonging, but delivers exhaustion. Because the more you depend on the gaze of others, the more blind you become to your own. You get used to being seen, but you don't see yourself. You expect recognition, but you don't recognize yourself. And little by little, your essence is silenced by the need to be loved. But there is a breaking point, a silent moment when you, tired of trying, just stop. And this moment doesn't scream. It doesn't need to announce anything. It just happens, like a sigh that turns into rebirth, like a tear that doesn't ask for comfort, only truth. At that moment, the loneliness that once hurt becomes a portal, because you realize that you were never alone. You simply abandoned yourself. True reconnection begins in the void, when you stop chasing external answers and start listening to what your soul has always whispered. And perhaps for the first time, you hear yourself. You find yourself, not as a perfect, polished, approved version, but as you are, with flaws, with doubts, with sacred imperfections, and yet worthy of love. In this reunion, a new type of strength is born, a strength that does not need to prove anything, that does not need the validation of the world, because it comes from the root. It comes from the center. It comes from a place so deep that no outside gaze can touch it. In front of the mirror, you begin to say what you have been waiting to hear for so long. You are enough. And at first, your mind may resist. It may doubt. It may even laugh. But keep going. Keep going until your soul believes it, until your inner gaze becomes stronger than any external applause, because what sustains you is not the noise of approval. It is the silence of truth. Spiritual maturity begins when you choose to be whole instead of being accepted, when you understand that pleasing everyone is the fastest way to lose yourself, and when you finally stop seeking permission to exist. Something awakens, something firm, something calm, something unbreakable, and that something is you. 7. The art of letting go without losing your essence. Letting go is not forgetting, it is remembering without imprisoning yourself. Suffering is rarely born from what happens. It is born from what you insist on holding on to when you should have already let go. A thought, a love, a guilt, an idea of how life should be. What hurts is not the end. It is the resistance to the end. Many believe that the act of letting go is a sign of weakness. But the truth is that letting go requires more courage than holding on, because when you let go, there is nowhere to hide. There is no more control. There are no guarantees, only emptiness, only space, only the now. And the now in itself is a demanding teacher. It does not allow old baggage. It does not accept ghosts disguised as memories. It asks you for lightness. It asks you for presence. It asks you for faith. But there is a subtle illusion hidden in the search for peace. Many people desire peace as a form of escape, as an immediate relief, an emotional anesthesia. True peace, however, does not avoid pain. It goes through it. It looks into the eyes of the one who hurts and says, "I will not run away anymore." Real peace is not silence on the outside. It is acceptance on the inside. Imagine bamboo in the face of a gale. It bends. It gives way, but it does not break, because its strength lies in its flexibility. It does not fight against the wind, it dances with it. The same applies to your soul. Resisting what is gone is fighting against the flow of life, but flowing with the movement is a sign of wisdom, of trust, of connection with something greater than your wounded ego. Practicing detachment does not mean abandoning love, memory, or dreams. It simply means accepting that you no longer need to suffer for them, that you can love without depending, that you can remember without bleeding, that you can move on without carrying what no longer fits. Close your eyes for a moment. Visualize what you most fear losing: a face, a story, a possibility that never came to fruition. Observe, feel, embrace, and now allow that image to fade away. No rush, no pain, just allow, because you are not what you lost. You are what remains, and what remains is sacred. It's not about forgetting, it's about transforming. What held you back yesterday can be fertile ground today. What hurt you can teach you how to heal, but only if you let it go. Only if you trust that, even if you lose, something in you will always be whole. The art of letting go is not about giving up. It's about trusting that what is truly yours remains. Even when everything leaves, even when everything changes, your essence remains firm, alive, untouched. 8. When silence heals more than 1,000 words. There are pains that don't ask for an explanation, only presence. The world is full of voices trying to fix what only silence can heal. Advice, opinions, ready-made phrases. All of this may sound beautiful, but often it's just more noise on a heart that just wants to breathe in peace. Because there are wounds that don't want to be explained, they want to be seen. There are tears that don't ask for a solution, they ask for acceptance. Silence has a wisdom that no words can reach. It doesn't try, it doesn't force, it just is. Present, whole, firm. Like the mountain that watches the valley, without judging, without interfering, just supporting with its presence everything that happens there. True silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of resistance. It is the inner space where you stop arguing with reality, where the mind is silent and the soul begins to speak, where the nervous system finds shelter, where chaos settles and something deeper emerges. Something that has always been there, but that you can only hear when the internal noise finally stops. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Exhale for 4 counts. And again, and again, and again. It's not just a technique, it's a declaration of presence. It's you telling your body, I am here. It's you telling your pain, I see you. It's you telling your past, I don't need to fight with you anymore. Silence heals because it doesn't interfere. It doesn't interrupt the natural process of pain. It allows it to do its job, to reveal, to purify, to transform. Every time you choose silence in the face of anxiety, in the face of anger, in the face of fear, you are teaching your brain that it is possible to inhabit the storm without getting lost in it. You are training your soul to trust the unseen. Thich Nhat Hanh said that silence is a form of profound prayer because it connects you to your source. And in that connection, there is healing. There is reconnection with what is essential. There is a way home, not the outer home of walls and ceilings, but the inner home of presence and truth. Sometimes what you need is not more information, it's more space. Space to feel, space to rest, space to remember who you are when no one else is looking. And that space is born of silence. In a world addicted to quick answers, silence is a revolution that begins within. When you choose not to react, not to explain, not to run away, but to just be, because only those who are at peace with their own silence can hear the voice of their own soul. 9. Daily training of the unshakable mind. The strength you admire in others also lives within you. No one is born ready. No one wakes up with a firm mind, tamed emotions, a calm spirit. Unshakability is not a gift granted little by little. It is a process, continuous, daily, often silent. A type of strength that is not shouted, not imposed. It is cultivated in small choices, in the smallest gestures, in the seconds when you could explode, but you breathe, in the moments when pain wants to control, but you remain. The human brain does not distinguish between training and reality, and this is a blessing, because every time you choose not to identify with the emotion, even for a brief moment, you are shaping your mind. You are teaching your nervous system that it is possible to feel without being swallowed up, that it is possible to observe without being dominated, that it is possible to choose even when everything inside you wants to give in. The unshakable mind is not one that does not feel. It is the one that feels everything, but does not become hostage to anything, that listens to fear, but does not kneel, that welcomes sadness, but does not stop there, that recognizes anger, but does not give in to destruction. This mind is not born ready. It is trained day after day, thought after thought. There is a method that transforms this training into living practice. First, recognize the impulse, the anger that rises, the anxiety that tightens, the fear that paralyzes. Name it, feel where it lives in your body. Then, observe the emotion as if it were not yours, as if it were a cloud passing by. You are not the cloud. You are the sky that contains it. Finally, choose the response that represents who you want to be. Not the automatic reaction, not the old pattern, but the conscious response, even if small, even if fragile. This process, done every day, changes your destiny. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to be constant. Emotional discipline is not born of rigidity, but of conscious repetition. And for that, you do not need a long list of practices. You need 3 simple anchors, repeated with presence, intentional silence. That moment when you simply stop, close your eyes, and go within. Radical gratitude, not the kind that expects great things, but the kind that bows before the invisible. Active presence, the commitment to be whole, even in the simplest tasks. You don't have to wait for big events to become strong. Strength is in the silent mornings, in the daily conflicts, in the pauses that no one sees. The unshakable mind is forged in the invisible, in the daily, in the intimate, and one day when the world tries to knock you down, you will realize that you no longer need to fight to stay standing, because you have already become a root. 10. The power that only silence knows. That which is true in you does not shout. There is a strength that does not impose itself. It does not need explanation nor proof. It does not present itself with fanfare, nor does it ask for validation. This strength is not built with masks, nor does it feed on applause. It emerges silently when you finally stop fighting what you feel and start listening to what is behind it. When the mind becomes silent, what is real begins to emerge, and in this space without noise, the true self reveals itself. It is not the character you created to survive. It is not the version shaped by traumas or expectations. It is the essence that has always been there, hidden stifled, forgotten, but intact. There is a great illusion being sold about strength, the idea that being unshakable is being tough. It is not feeling, it is not giving in, but the truth is the opposite. Being unshakable means having roots so deep that even when the wind of the world blows hard, you dance with it without getting lost. Hardness breaks, flexibility sustains. Being whole is more valuable than being strong, because when you are whole, pain does not fragment, criticism does not drag, fear does not paralyze. You can waver, but you do not fall apart. You can fall, but you do not abandon yourself. This is true firmness, not the kind that is built to protect yourself, but the kind that is born from the deep encounter with who you are. And this encounter requires silence, a silence that is not the absence of sound, but total presence, a silence that does not run away from discomfort, but passes through it, that does not seek peace as an escape, but as a revelation. Thich Nhat Hanh said that deep silence is like a flower that blooms from within. And this flower, when it opens, transforms everything around it without saying a single word. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to be invulnerable. True strength is not in not falling, but in rising with greater awareness. True peace is not in eliminating chaos, but in remaining serene in the midst of it. And true power is what comes from the silence you sustain within yourself. So if there is one thing you need to remember, it is this: you did not come to be a stone, you came to be a mountain. The stone is hard, yes, but it breaks with time. The mountain does not need to prove its strength. It is simply there, present, whole, unshakable. And that is what you already are, when you are silent enough to listen. 11. The mind that masters emotions is not born ready. Steadiness is a seed that is cultivated, not a gift with which one is born. It is easy to admire those who remain calm in the midst of chaos. Easy, because from the outside everything looks like control. But inside, what sustains this serenity is not the absence of emotion. It is repetition. Repetition of small conscious choices. Repetition of silent deviations from reactivity. Repetition of self-control as an act of love, not denial. The unshakable mind is not born with anyone. It is trained every day in the silence of decisions that no one sees. Every time you choose to breathe before reacting, every time you allow the feeling to pass through you instead of projecting it outward, every time you remember that you are the master of your own response and not hostage to impulse. Neuroscience confirms what ancient wisdom has always known. The brain changes through repetition. The prefrontal cortex, the part that chooses, ponders, and observes, strengthens like a muscle. And like all muscles, it grows not in comfort, but in endurance. It grows when you hold the emotion without dissolving into it, when you observe it, like someone listening to a child crying, without judgment, just presence. There is a simple but profound path. First, acknowledge the impulse. Feel the heat of anger, the grip of fear, the tremor of insecurity, without becoming any of them. Then, look at the emotion as if it were a visitor. It has arrived, yes, but it is not you. And then, finally, choose. Not what is easiest, not what is automatic, but what represents who you want to be. This training does not require hours a day. It requires intention. It requires honesty. It requires courage not to follow the path of old pain, but rather the path of new awareness. Because every impulse is a crossroads, an invitation to repetition or to transcendence. That is why the most powerful practice is the one that is done in the invisible, the one that no one sees, but that transforms everything. 3 silent pillars support this new mind. Intentional silence, which calms the inner noise and reveals the essential. Radical gratitude, which repositions the gaze even on cloudy days. And active presence, the art of being whole in every gesture, no matter how small. Transformation is not an explosion, it is an accumulation. It is not a sudden enlightenment, it is a continuous birth. You do not wake up unshakable, you become unshakable. One small act of consciousness at a time. 12. The firmness that blooms in silence. When the soul is still, the whole world changes its tone. There is a kind of power that does not need to be displayed. It does not shout. It does not impose itself. It does not force. This power is born in silence, not in the silence of escape, but in the silence of presence. The kind in which you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. The kind in which you finally hear yourself. When the inner turmoil ceases, what remains is not emptiness. It is clarity. There is a strength that only silence knows. A wisdom that is not formed with arguments, but with listening. Because the external noise ceases when the internal noise is welcomed. When you no longer need to defend yourself from yourself, nor fill every void with distraction. And in that space between one thought and another, something awakens. Something that is not learned in books, but felt on your skin. Being unshakable is not being invincible. It is being whole. It is not about not feeling. It is about not fragmenting in the face of feeling, not to be pulled by every emotional wave, but to learn to surf on top of it. A firm soul is not made of stone. It is made of roots. Roots that dive deep, that sustain even in the strongest winds. Many people confuse rigidity with firmness, but rigidity is fragile. It breaks easily. It breaks with the unexpected. Firmness does not. Firmness is flexible. It bends without destroying itself. It adapts without betraying itself. And it is in this paradox that true strength lives. Soft on the outside, solid on the inside, gentle in gesture, non-negotiable in essence. The absence of emotional noise reveals the presence of the true self, because when you are silent inside, the world begins to listen. Listen to your truth. Listen to your essence. Listen to what has always been there, but which was muffled by fear, by noise, by haste. And when this happens, something changes, not outside but inside. You did not come to be a stone. You came to be a mountain. Firm presence. Deep silence, strength that welcomes, a peak that sees far, because it is in this state of lucid stillness that its greatness is revealed. And there is nothing more powerful than someone who knows themselves and chooses not to get lost, even in the midst of a storm. 13. The point at which everything becomes a choice. And when you understand, there is no turning back. There comes a time when something inside you refuses to continue being pushed by the chaos. A silent moment, but definitive. Your heart still races. Your thoughts still try to dominate, but something has changed. Because now you know. You know that feeling is not the same as getting lost. You know that reacting is not the same as living. You know that there is a space, a sacred space between stimulus and response, and that it is exactly there that freedom lives. Emotion comes like a wave, but you no longer need to dive into all of them. You no longer drown in impulse. You no longer confuse intensity with truth. There is a center within you that no longer depends on the world to remain at peace. A silent core that observes everything and chooses firmly, chooses consciously, chooses with purpose. It is at this point that transformation stops being an effort and becomes nature. Not because you have become perfect, but because you have learned to position yourself internally, because you recognize the signs, because you listen before you act, because you breathe before you rush. And that pause, so small on the outside, is immense on the inside. It is what saves you. It is what anchors you. It is what brings you back to yourself. The mind quiets down, the body slows down, and the soul begins to remember what really matters. It is no longer about winning. It is about staying whole. It is no longer about convincing. It is about remaining true. You realize that you do not need to dominate the world. You just need to not be dominated by it. And this simple understanding changes everything. Life will continue to try to test you. Emotions will continue to try to drag you. But now there is ground, a solid ground, a ground made of choices. Choices that no one can take away from you, because in the end, true victory is not giving up. It is being the deep root in the middle of the hurricane. It is being the silence that remains while everything around screams. It is being the space where the unshakable is born. 14. When being unshakable is not about strength, but about roots. And then you stop resisting and start holding on. Most people try to be unshakable, like those who harden their bodies, clench their teeth and close their fists. But that is resistance. And what resists, breaks. What resists, breaks. True firmness is not made of rigidity, but of depth. The tree does not remain standing because it faces the wind brutally, but because it is rooted where the wind does not touch. Being unshakable is not about waging an internal war against each emotion. It is about knowing the terrain where these emotions are born. It is about realizing clearly that there is no need to protect yourself from pain when you have presence. Presence sustains. Presence does not run away, does not deny, does not disguise. It welcomes, it sees, and because it sees, it goes through. There is a silent wisdom in those who have suffered enough to no longer be impressed by the noises of the mind. It is not apathy, it is lucidity. It's the kind of calm that comes from someone who has been through a fire and discovered that fire can burn, yes, but it can also purify, and that if you don't run away from it, it reveals who you really are. You learn over time that you no longer need to prove your strength, because true strength doesn't need to be displayed. It reveals itself in the way you don't waver, in the way you stay when the world tries to tear you away from yourself. It's in the way you breathe, even when everything seems to be falling apart. It's in the way you love, even after you've been hurt. It's in the way you keep going, even without guarantees. Being unshakable is being at peace with the fact that not everything will be as you expect. It's allowing yourself to feel without getting lost in the feeling. It's knowing that every emotion comes with a message, but none has the power to command your life without your consent. It's knowing that you can be in pain and still be yourself. In the end, it's not about not falling. It's about where you anchor yourself, because those who have roots may even sway, but they will not fall. Those who have roots may even suffer, but they will not get lost. Those who have roots do not need to be a rock. They can be a mountain, firm, silent, unshakable. 15. The emotional truth. No one told you about self-control. True freedom never screams, it whispers inside. For a long time, we were taught that controlling our emotions was like locking a wild animal in a cage. That self-control meant repressing, silencing, ignoring. But that's not mastery, that's fear. Fear of feeling too much, fear of falling apart, fear of losing control, precisely because we try to control it with brute force. The truth is more subtle. Self-control is not emotional castration, it's alchemy. It's when you look your anger in the eye and transform it into clarity. It's when you hold your anxiety in your arms and guide it back to presence. It's when you allow sadness to pass through you, but not drown you. You don't numb yourself, you become aware. Being unshakable isn't about not feeling. It's about not giving in to the first wave. It's knowing that between impulse and action, there is a space, a sacred interval, where the future is decided, and this space is where true power resides. It is there that the soul calmly chooses what the ego would try to resolve in a hurry. Emotional control does not happen by shouting, but in the silence between thoughts. It is not built by imposition, but by listening. Listening to the body, listening to the heart, listening to the internal stories that you believed for so long, but that no longer serve you, because no one loses control all at once. The loss is gradual, subtle, invisible. It begins when you believe that you need to react to everything to assert your strength, but true strength chooses when to respond, and often chooses not to respond. At its core, self-control is knowing the difference between reacting on impulse and acting with integrity. It is understanding that not every emotion is an invitation to the stage. Some are just passing clouds. Others are mirrors. Some come to show you where they hurt, others to remind you of who you are. When you understand this, you discover something precious. You are not your fear. You are not your anger. You are not your past. You are the one who observes all this and yet remains unshakable, not because you don't feel, but because you feel everything and yet choose consciously. Because whoever dominates themselves dominates the world without having to raise their voice, without having to defeat anyone, just being whole. 16. When fear visits you silently. The soul doesn't scream, but it trembles inside when fear approaches. It arrives without warning, sometimes in the early hours of the morning, sometimes in the middle of a conversation, sometimes while you're smiling. It doesn't make a sound, it doesn't have a face, but you recognize it. Your body tightens, your thoughts race, and even without real danger, something inside you shrinks. Fear doesn't need logic, it feeds on doubt, on what-ifs, on the absence of ground. But there's something no one has told you. Fear is a messenger, not an enemy. It didn't come to paralyze you, but to show you where there's still a gap between what you want and what you believe you deserve. It points to the places where trust hasn't yet grown, where faith is still fragile, where self-love hasn't yet taken firm root. Many times, fear isn't about the future. It's the echo of an unresolved past, a poorly healed memory that projects itself into the present. An ancient scream that still lives in your nervous system, and you feel as if you were about to fall again, even with your feet on the ground, as if you were being rejected again, even in the face of affection, as if you were losing everything, even though you had lost nothing. But it is in that instant, in that moment when fear manifests itself, that consciousness can awaken, because each fear is a chance to come back to yourself, to take a deep breath, to say to yourself, I can feel this, and still stay here. That is courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to go through it with presence. Don't fight it, don't run away, just stay, witness it, observe how it tries to protect you from something that no longer exists, and realize that the more you allow yourself to feel clearly, the less fear needs to scream. It dissolves in the light of attention. It calms down when it is heard. It retreats when it realizes that you have grown. Because in the end, fear is not a sentence. It is an invitation, a call to grow, to mature, to stop being a hostage to the invisible and become intimate with yourself. This is how you overcome fear, not with armor, but with presence, not with force, but with truth, your truth. The one that silently already knows that it is greater than any threat, the one that even trembling still remains standing. Son, when haste takes you away from the present, the mind races, but the soul waits. We live as if life were always starting one step ahead, as if peace were somewhere after the next achievement, the next answer, the next certainty. Haste has become a way of existing, and without realizing it, we move away from the present as if it were a temporary place, a waypoint between two more important destinations. But the now is all that exists. It is the only space where transformation happens, the only home where the soul can breathe. And the more we rush, the more we lose ourselves, because haste is not speed. It is escape, escape from silence, escape from listening, escape from the feeling of emptiness that can only be understood when we stop filling it with occupations. Hurry makes us believe that we are going somewhere, but in truth, we are only distancing ourselves from the place where we should be. The now does not demand performance. It demands presence. It does not demand efficiency. It offers truth, but to receive it, you have to stop. Stop justifying. Stop speeding. Stop forcing yourself to be something before you simply are. Time is not an enemy. It is a master. We do not lack it. We are the ones who waste it trying to cross it as if it were a barrier. But time is a mirror. It reflects how much we are or are not present within ourselves. That is why true abundance is not in what is achieved quickly, but in what is lived fully. A deep look, a welcomed silence, a conscious breath, a decision made calmly. All of this is worth more than 1,000 hasty plans. When you slow down, the world fits inside you again. Things stop being urgent and become true. Choices become wiser, emotions become clearer, connections become more real. Life does not want to rush, it wants presence, because everything that is done with presence matures. Everything that is done with urgency weakens. It's not time that heals. It's what you do with it when you decide to stop running and just be. 18. When fear disguises itself as logic, the mind argues, but it is the heart that denounces. There is a voice inside you that is subtle but constant. It does not shout, does not impose, does not dramatize. It reasons, it calculates, it seems sensible, but deep down, it is paralyzing you. It is fear, wearing the mask of logic. How many times have you postponed an important step because it was not the right time? How many times have you stopped putting yourself out there, creating, loving, trying, because it was not viable, it was not safe, it did not make sense? At first glance, it seems like prudence, but when you look more closely, what you find is fear disguised as reason. Fear does not like to be named. It feels more protected when it hides behind apparently logical arguments. It prefers to say, "This will not work," instead of "I'm afraid of failing." He prefers, "This doesn't suit me," to "I'm afraid of being rejected." He's an artist of dissimulation, but the body feels, the heart knows, the soul senses. There's a silent tension when we're living below our potential. There's a nameless restlessness when the mind overcomes the spirit. It's like a half-breath, a joy that never arrives. Logic is an ally, but it's not a guide. It organizes paths, but it doesn't choose direction, because direction comes from desire, it comes from intuition, it comes from that silent place that knows what's right, even when it doesn't seem reasonable. It's not about denying reason. It's about realizing when it's become a shield, when it's being used to justify staying in the comfort zone. What we often call a conscious decision is actually a pact with fear. All real change is scary. All expansion seems at first a threat, because the ego fears dissolution. It prefers the familiar, even if unhappy, to a new one that it can't control. But the soul doesn't want control. It wants truth. So, observe with honesty. Question the voice that tries to protect you too much. Listen to what lies behind perfect reasoning, because logic may be accurate, but only courage is liberating. 19. The pain of waiting that never ends. Misunderstood hope is just a postponement of life. There is a type of waiting that corrodes you from within, a silent waiting that cannot be justified with words, but that shapes your routine, your thoughts, your feelings. It is waiting disguised as hope, the kind that says, one day it will change, but that deep down knows that nothing is being done to make it happen. Waiting is sometimes necessary, but there is a fine line between letting things mature in time and hiding behind it. Many call it patience, but it is not patience, it is anesthesia. It is life being put on hold, as if time were responsible for healing what only movement can transform. Waiting becomes cruel when you do not realize that it has already become a prison, when deep down, your soul has already understood that what you are waiting for will not come, or it will not come in the way you imagined, or it will not come from outside, because it needs to be born within. There are those who wait for recognition from someone they never knew how to see. There are those who wait for forgiveness, for a guilt they never freed themselves from. There are those who wait for the ideal moment, the clear sign, the perfect courage. But all of this is just the ego trying to postpone facing the truth, because the truth, when it arrives, does not ask for permission. It breaks the promises that fear made to keep us immobile. It shows that what we called hope was just attachment, and that attachment to waiting is one of the most subtle forms of self-abandonment. When you wait for something that does not depend on you, your soul falls asleep. When you hand over to time that which only your choice can inaugurate, you transfer the power to exist. And time, despite being wise, does not walk for anyone. It only offers the days. The one who walks is you. It is not about acting in a hurry. It is about not hiding behind the calendar, because those who wait too long forget how to move. And with time, what was a pause becomes routine. What was an interval becomes the plot. And life, that indomitable force, was not born to be lived in suspension. 20. the silence that listens to the invisible. In the interval between the end and the beginning, there is a place where the soul whispers what the world cannot hear. When everything falls silent, what remains? Not the noise of opinions, nor the weight of expectations. What remains is that which cannot be said with words. It is the whisper of consciousness, the breath of essence, the memory of what you once were and what you can still be. Life is not resolved by shouting. It reveals itself in listening, and not just any listening, but the kind that is done with closed eyes, a naked heart, and an awake spirit. Because it is only in silence that you can hear what has always been there, waiting for space. No matter how much noise the world makes around you, there will always be within you a voice that takes its time, a voice that does not impose itself but that also does not shut up, a voice that knows your fears but insists on your greatness. This voice does not cry out for conquests. It calls for wholeness. It doesn't push you out. It invites you in. And as you dive into that inner space, that invisible territory that the world neglects, you begin to remember. Remember that what you seek has never been in the hands of others, that validation, love, direction have always lived in the same place, in the center of your own being. Everything that has been said so far about illusions, about identity, about pain, and about rebirth is just the way back to yourself. Because the greatest power is not in conquering the world, it is in conquering yourself. And when that happens, when you look yourself in the eye without masks, without escape, without excuses, something changes. The search ceases. Comparison dissolves, attachment weakens, and time stops being a threat. You don't need any more promises or formulas or secrets. You need silence, silence that embraces, silence that reveals, silence that awakens, because in the end, it is in this silence that true power awakens. The power that does not depend on anything, the power that does not demand applause, the power that already is. It was just dormant. Now you know where it is, and maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of the end of all waiting, and the beginning of a presence that will never be abandoned.